Today we have an interview with Celine, who's one of our wonderful Mochary Method coaches. Celine, welcome. And I want to first start off by hearing your life story. What's that like?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm originally from Malaysia. I came to the States for business school at Stanford. And thought I was only going to be here for a couple of years after B school, just doing consulting, which was my thing back then. And here I am many, many years later, and I'm still here, still in the area, still really close to Stanford. And I think I'm here for good now.
What made you want to stay?
Mm. Quite honestly, it was the opportunities. Back, I have really eclectic interests, and going back to Malaysia, I don't think I would have been able to indulge in them in quite the same way. And my interests were, everything from tech to finance to I like martial arts. I like dance. I like being able to work with really big companies and deal with really thorny problems. And it felt like being here, there was an opportunity to do that because, I'm sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Mm, yeah, I hear you. And from what I know about you, you do have a lot of interest and a lot of knowledge and expertise as well. And I don't know if I consciously knew that you spent so much time in Malaysia. I think in my mind you had come here earlier, because you do know the industry so well and you have such an established life here. But
I actually left Malaysia when I was 15 and moved to Singapore on a scholarship to go to high school, which is, by the way, where I met my husband because he was on the same scholarship too. And we, a couple of years, I'd moved. So I got my undergraduate in the UK, and then I went to Singapore to work, and then came to the States after that.
So how did all this moving around and experiencing the world at a young age make you the person that you are today?
Good question, Sabrina. I think it built a lot of independence because at the age of 15, I felt very much like, oh, I could just take care of myself and do what I needed to do. I was self-motivated. My parents weren't looking over my shoulder, looking at telling me to do my homework, for example. So it was entirely up to me whether I succeeded or failed. And that actually made a huge difference to my ability to, I think, make the right choice based on what's important to me. So that's one thing. Another thing I would add is moving around a lot. You meet, or at least I met a lot of very different people. And that diversity, it really opened my eyes to, wow, people are very different on the surface, but fundamentally, we all really just want connection. We want to know each other. We want to belong. Because I felt that really strongly whenever I moved around, wanting to belong somewhere. And then realizing, hey, other people, even if they've lived here all their life, feel that same way too.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And I'm hearing a mixture of different interests, different knowledge that you've talked to before, and now like an appreciation for different types of people. And how does that impact the way that you coach?
In two ways. One is I appreciate the diversity of perspectives, life experiences, history that my clients bring to the table, right? Because it makes them who they are. And I also fundamentally believe that all of us have needs. Like we might have very different experiences, but at a fundamental level, we can connect through our needs and our feelings because those feel more universal. The need to be loved, the need to belong, the need to do well, the need to succeed. All of those are ways we can connect, even if on the surface we look super different.
So now it's making me want to ask you the question about the transition between consulting to coaching. And then you've shared that with me when we talked, but my understanding is consulting and coaching is very different. And you started now to talk about the common theme of coaching. So, how did you find coaching as something that you would like to do?
Hmm. I was a consultant for a really long time. It's a very logical pursuit and really changed my mind around going into coaching and helping people out on a one-to-one basis was when, quite honestly, a really difficult time in my life was when my father passed away. He was back in Malaysia. He was pretty successful towards the end of his life. And I asked him as he was dying what he was proud of or what was important to him. And he said, Celine, I'm so glad that my whole family, and he had a huge family, I'm so glad that my family is with me. I must have done something right. My friends all want to see me. Um, everybody's here with me. And at the end of it all, I realized it was the people that mattered. He didn't talk about, oh, I've done all these successful things in work and in business, and I've accomplished so much. My dad started out poor, and built his way up. But he didn't talk about any of that. He talked about the people. And then I realized, wow, I want that too. And so I was working on it for myself.
Mm.
I and then I realized I want that for other people too, the people that I work with, my clients. And that was the impetus for it. And then I'll say that I had like the huge fortune and good luck to be working with a sponsor and a mentor, my then business partner, Agnes Lee, who then introduced me to the concept. She's a coach and has been a longtime facilitator for interpersonal dynamics at Stanford. So she said, I think you'd be great at coaching, so you should try it out. And so she pushed me to go into it. And then she would, we talk every week. So she would say, what's going on for you? So she would actually coach me through my journey into coaching. And then she was also impetus for, Celine, I think you'd be great for interpersonal dynamics. You should try that out. So the value of having, I think, a very meaningful experience with my dad, plus the support of a mentor and sponsor and friend, were two critical pieces that got me into coaching.
Two different, very different, but very important people got you into the business of working deeper with people. And
Yes.
can you explain interpersonal dynamics for people who've never heard of it?
Yes. Interpersonal dynamics is possibly the most popular elective, MBA elective at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. People think of business school as really logical and all about finance and marketing, very left brain type stuff. And then interpersonal dynamics is the one course, it's popularly known as touchy-feely. It's about learning how you come across to people and how to interact with people. Because when you're a leader, that is exactly what work is all about. That's what business is all about. It's working with others. And the way it's actually being called one of the most transformative courses at the GSB. And the way it works is get into a room with 12 other people and you sit there. There's no formal hierarchy. There's no rules for what you have to do. There's no topic. You just sit in the room and you look at each other and you start and you give feedback to each other. So for example, if you and I were in Feely together in that room, I might do something and then you would say, Celine, when you did that, I felt fantastic about you and I feel so much more connected. Or you could say, Celine, when you did that, it pissed me off. And I lost trust in you. And then you and I would have a discussion about that. Now imagine that happening, but with 12 other people. We're all giving you feedback all the time. It's a huge opportunity to learn so much about how I'm coming across to people and also how I'm interacting with them and how I can interact better.
So, what was the most insightful or memorable moment from facilitating that?
One incident I remember is that I actually really made a misstep with a student, and this is pretty vulnerable for me to say there's confidentiality, so I won't get the details, but I made a big misstep with a student and I offended them deeply through a mistake of my own. And what was really transformative about that experience was that student taught me so much about, she gave me a lot of grace. She gave me a lot of empathy, even though I had wronged her. She gave me the space to repair. And what I learned from that is that it's possible to make a huge mistake and to still be able to come back from it. And that what helps us come back from it is empathy, is the willingness to dialogue. It taught me that out of conflict and out of mistakes, we can still build stronger relationships. And I think she helped me grow to be a better person, because I'm going to be very mindful about, making this mistake again.
And it sounds like just the opportunity to repair, right? Because I don't think it's a norm for people to think that you can make a mistake and you can talk about it, and there are skills involved to repair a relationship. So you've seen a lot, you've experienced it, you've maybe helped people through that in facilitating that class. How did that help with your work with CEOs?
It helps so much, because I'll give you an example from today. I had a CEO call me and say, I'm about to step into a discussion with my one down, and I'm anticipating conflict. I have really strong needs, and the other person has really strong needs as well. But I'm worried I'm going to go in there and just ride over them. What I do. And so we had a discussion where I pulled out exactly that interpersonal dynamics toolkit. We talked through, well, CEO, what are your needs? Yes, you want this. You want, this is your at the surface level, but what's the underlying need? And it turned out that even though he was asking for something at this level, the underlying need was, I want clarity. I want to know, I want to trust my people. And then from a place of that ask, I could then coach him to say, all right, if you go in and say, I'm not asking for this, I'm asking, help me understand how I can trust you and the team, then you can collaborate with them, with the other people in your team to find a solution. So it's the creative development of solutions. I was actually telling this story that they in Interpersonal Dynamics, it's like a husband and wife who are trying to decide where to go on vacation. One person wants to go to the mountains and ski, and the other person wants to go to the beach and go to a spa. And you'd think, wow, there's actually no way for the two of these people to come together and find a solution that works. But if you get to the underlying need and ask, exactly do you want? Turns out the person who wants to go to the mountains actually just want to be outdoors and in the cold. And the person who wants to go to the beach spa actually just wants to relax and have some self-care and be a massage. Well, you've just expanded the range of options. Why not go to a spa in the mountains or a spa outdoors in the cold? That could do it.
So good. So good. Okay. Following up on that, so you've helped the CEO clarify his needs and he feels more prepared to go in there. So he goes in with more options to negotiate, to communicate. But what if the other person, you can't coach them. You don't know how they're like. What if they're resistant to sharing their need or combative? Like how do you coach the CEO to move through that?
We did exactly that.
Right.
So the first thing you do in any conflict is to actually hear the other person out. And we talk about this too in the Mochary Method curriculum. It's people go into conflict with very elevated levels of arousal, and it stops us from hearing the other person. So I coach my CEOs to start with empathy and start with listening. And the way to demonstrate that you are actually listening is to not come in with your asks first, but to sit and ask them, like, what do you want? What do you need? Pause and stay with curiosity and keep asking, and then reflect it back to them. I'm hearing you say this. in. Is this right? There's more? Tell me. Okay, I'm here to say this other thing. Is this right? And you repeat it back to them. And you keep going until they say, yes, that's right. And usually at that point, the energy level has come down. And because they're feeling heard, they are more able to then hear the CEO, hear you.
Mm.
And so we actually coached through how do we approach this conversation? The first step is listen to them first. Listen, empathize, and find out what you connect to there. Yes, I'm hearing you don't want to be busy. I'm hearing you don't want additional work. I'm hearing you want me to trust you. That right? Yes. Okay, I'm willing to give you, I want to trust you. I'm 95% of the way there. I just need this other thing to get me that remaining 5%. That's where you can start putting your ask in. And then you can ask them, can you reflect back what you heard me say? So a little read it, it's true, but you can coach them in the moment to do it.
So I love that you basically just gave a complete playbook into how you can go into a conversation and resolve it really in the smoothest manner. But I want to continue to poke in this.
Of course.
What situations do those rules no longer apply? Does that ever happen?
There are times when everybody is there's so much built up resentment that it's very hard to self-regulate. So when you're triggered, it's very hard to do this. The ways that the recommendations I have in those situations are to take a beat and actually separate and be in separate spaces for a while, because it gives time to down-regulate. That's one. The other recommendation is to actually process on your own first. So I'll tell the CEOs, write it down or talk it out with me, however you process. Let's talk through it so that we can regulate and form a plan. And then if somebody who's listening to this doesn't have a coach, talk to a friend. Have them help you regulate downward first. And recommend that the other person do so as well. The other thing is come in with a mindset of just hold a little bit more patience. You know, people, when they're excited, they tend to go really fast. It's like, I'll say something to you, Sabrina, and then you come back at me, and then I'll come back at you. And then the faster you go, the easier it is for that energy to rise. I would say take a break. You say something, I'll sit there with silence for a little bit. And then I'll just remind myself to repeat it back. And it takes practice, you know. You mentioned playbook, Sabrina. It's one thing. My own coach, Dan Winter, who's awesome, he said this. He said, it's one thing to hand somebody the book on how to, they could have read it 5 times, but when you look at the water, it's still really hard to make it across the pool, right? So it takes practice. So one thing I also recommend is role play. You know, actually role play it with your friend or with your coach as if you're in this conflict. I will say this is one of the questions a lot of my students that are in my T group in Interpersonal Dynamics ask. You know, what if I'm skilled at this or have experienced learning in this and the other person hasn't? What do I do then? And in a situation like that, I have 2 recommendations. Actually 3. One is that just by you modeling the behavior of listening, it can help them regulate, and then maybe they can start doing it as well. The other is our write-ups in Mochary Method, sharing them in a team before you actually have the conversation helps them realize what they could be doing also. And the other thing is just a live coaching in the moment. Hey, I said this, but I just want to check that you heard me. Could you repeat that back to me? And then when they repeat it back and they've only got 80% of it, you can say, yes, and here's the other piece I want to make sure is coming across also.
So I want to ask a different question, which is, in the current state, when you're coaching CEOs, what is the hardest personal challenge for you?
The hardest personal challenge is wanting to come and give them the answers. Because I find that sometimes when a CEO comes to me and says, I'm having this problem and I want to resolve it this way, my consultant mind is like, okay, let me help you with exactly that problem. But what I've found is that a lot of times there are actually underlying issues or underlying needs that we haven't gotten to yet. That's one. And so going to the deeper level is actually what's more helpful. The second thing is that coaching where I provide the answer is not developmental, right? It's like giving the person a fish instead of teaching them how to fish. I want to teach them how to fish. And usually it's better if they teach themselves how to fish, quite honestly. That's the best kind of coaching.
We talked about needs quite a lot already. And then you just said if we don't get to the need level, it's not as helpful. Maybe say more about how it's not quite helpful if you have any examples lately in coaching sessions.
And by the way, I'm starting to think about it as an and, where I provide the answer really quickly for, okay, you have this immediate need. You have this immediate ask. Let's deal with that really quickly as a way of building enough safety and trust to be able to dive into the deeper issue. Because sometimes for some clients, I find that, asking them right away, well, what about all these other things? They're like, no, but I wanted to just solve this one thing first. They're blocked. They can't hear the digging into the deeper thing until they've had that like quick hit of, I just want that quick solve.
Right.
It depends.
You're demonstrating, I'm hearing you first. And once they feel heard in that ask, then like you said, right, there's more room for them to hear you and to follow your lead. So yeah, say more about when you do get to go into that deeper area. What does that look like? Because I think people understand depth and needs and the core issue in so many different ways. What does that actually look like in CEO coaching?
So one of the challenges that came through, and I'm amalgamating for confidentiality purposes, I'm amalgamating from a range of clients. One thing that comes across sometimes is a CEO comes in and says, I really want to know what's happening at the detailed level, what's going on with each of these departments, right? I want to get reports on a regular basis. I want to be able to see those dashboards. I want to hear what's going on. And the challenge with scaling organizations is that at some point, you can't do that anymore, right? The CEO has to let go and has to be comfortable with the fact that they can't see everything that's going on. Usually when you're, a 10-person company, you can just talk to everyone and know exactly what's happening. But when you're a 500-person company, that doesn't work anymore. You can't do it. And so there's some component of, okay, I'm hearing you, CEO, want to know what's happening in your company and you want clarity. At the same time, we need to develop some capacity for you to step back and let your people do the work and to have you trust them that they can do the work. So then the deeper question is, what would it take you to trust your people? What would it take you to feel like you have enough clarity without having people at the edges of your organization, spending half their time developing reports? Like, is there software you can put in place? But software tends to be the patch. Yes, you need some information, but how much or how little? And how can you develop that trust?
Right. Now we're going into that developmental stage that you're talking about, which is let us stretch the muscle of trust. Let us see how much more you can tolerate in terms of uncertainty and discomfort and see that, right? And what you're really describing is the software and the update and people working around the clock to give you updates. That's kind of like the band-aid. The real thing is, why are you not trusting your team, and how can we enable you to feel more trust?
Right. And trust is just one possibility. It could be, maybe the structures aren't set up to enable people to do the work that they need to do. And maybe that's what we need to work on. Because sometimes what the presenting issue is, things are breaking and I need to know what's going on so I can go in and fix it. But the answer could be, maybe you need to trust the people more. Maybe the structures need to be in place for them to be able to solve the problem on their own. Maybe they're lacking the data, they're lacking the support. Maybe they don't have the space to work on the problem, or maybe we don't have a culture of, postmortems to learn from our mistakes, or maybe we keep solving repeated issues and we're not getting to the root cause. It could be a myriad of issues. But those are the more fundamental needs. The presenting issue of I want to know what's happening at the edges of my organization, solving that is the Band-Aid.
Yes. Okay. And I love the very concrete examples that you've given. So you're saying it could be more of an emotional, ephemeral thing like trust, but it could also be these very concrete things. And that's what you can expect from a coach, which is we'll talk about the Band-Aid solution if you want that, but also investigate all of these structural solutions. Is that right?
Right. And it's sometimes hard to know which one it is until you've talked it out with someone in a safe space. So I think of what I provide to CEOs is also a safe space to come and say, I'm having these issues. I have no one to talk to about it. I don't feel safe talking to my board about it. I don't feel like I can talk about this with my team because I don't want to, jeopardize their trust in me. Or I just want to be able to think through it before I talk to them. And this is where a coach comes in. We are a safe space for them. It can be lonely being a CEO. I also want to bring up one other thing, which is that we were talking for a little bit about scaling. And I just want to reflect, I have no judgment of my CEOs when they say I'm having these challenges, because scaling is really hard. Scaling is tough, right? You're going from a small 10% company or less to like millions and millions of dollars and hundreds or thousands of people. It's tough. I just want to acknowledge that.
So you really get the journey of your clients, and you want to make sure that they know that when they come and talk to you, it's a space without judgment. They don't have to worry about what will my coach think of me. And you understand it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Okay. So would there be anything that you feel fear in your clients knowing about you?
I think it's less of a fear of them knowing this about me, and it's more of a fear of me not being able to help them. I think that's the fear that's the most prominent for me. It's that they'll come to me and somehow I can't help them. And then the way I talk myself through it is, sometimes just being the space for them to surface their fears or to surface their issues and talk through it and know that there's someone in their corner who has some ability to help them discuss stuff. I think that's sometimes that's all you need. So I try to start from there.
Whatever direction you want to take it, let's stay with this, which is a certain fear about not being able to help someone, which I think not just in coaches, leaders also have that same fear in some ways, not being able to help your customers, not being able to help your executive team, not being able to help your direct report in a certain way. And you just described really grounding yourself in what is it that I'm doing. I'm a space for people to talk to. I have my skills, and to go back to what you do know. But has it happened before where you felt like you weren't able to help someone?
Yes, I will say this actually comes to, it was a situation where the person probably needed counseling rather than coaching. I mean, it's used, my take is, so the situation was that the CEO was presenting, and every time we talked, there was a significant amount of elevated stress. And then it turns out that she was also getting help with anxiety on the side, not on the side, but with her therapist. And I'm a huge proponent of therapy. Like I myself I have my entire support system, and it includes a therapist. And I strongly believe like there's so much benefit in having that help. And it turns out that for the issues we were working with that were presenting, they were actually a manifestation of her anxiety. And there was no way in coaching that we could deal with it without her having dealt with it first with her therapist. So the way I like to think about it is therapy is archaeology. You kind of dig into the past. and then look at stuff, understand what happened, and then it takes us up to kind of regulation and regularity. And then coaching is architecture. It's forward building, it's momentum, it's let's look at solutions, and you need both. And it takes us into a place of, the coaching also takes us into a place of heightened performance. So a lot of times I think we need both. And when clients present who actually need to spend some time first in the archaeology, I will suggest that.
Right, right. And I think that's such a helpful verbalization of the difference between therapy and coaching, because I know I'm sure you get lots of people asking you, is this right for me? What support am I needing? And that just said that, hey, sometimes you need therapy alone at first, and sometimes you need both at the same time.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
being a CEO is a challenging job. It's useful to have all of those support structures.
And there's another thing I want to speak about, which is as a coach, you deal with a lot of people. There's a lot of energy exchange. You are in leadership of other people. That's similar to a CEO, where they deal with people all day, every day as well. And they are leading other people, and they may not be able to put all their needs and wants at first all of the time. So for you, how do you feel yourself through this work?
It quite honestly, Sabrina, this is my learning edge and this is my challenge.
Mhm.
My bent is to go all out. And you and I have talked about this. I don't spend enough time in restoration, but I am pushing myself to, again, there's a document on the Mochary Method curriculum that talks about this, actually switching off and having time to just get bored and do nothing and unplug from devices. So tactically, what I try to do is I unplug an hour before bedtime. I try to meditate every day. I try to spend time on what my friend Ed Batista, also another amazing coach, says is MESS. It's meditation, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction. So I try to work on those. Ed, I'm not sure I make it. I do all of them successfully, but I'm trying. Yeah, and then quite honestly, I find it's restorative to spend time with my family. So I have my husband and I, we're childhood sweethearts. We started going out in high school, so spending time with him is restoring for me. I like to spend time with my children. And then I'm also highly appreciative that at Mochary, we have quarterly weeks off. The entire organization shuts down for a week every quarter. And it's amazing to not be on vacation and then thinking about, oh, are there Slack messages and emails coming through?
Yes. Okay, good. Lots of great tips on how to restore. And I love that you acknowledge that this is something that you're still working on. And we don't have to be perfect to be in leadership positions and to be a coach or to hold space for other people. You speak about family briefly. I just feel inclined to ask, how does being a coach play a part in your role as a mom and a part of the family?
Two things I will say. One is that I try to bring my coaching skills into family, and I think it helps. And I think it's a way of modeling for my children, how to empathize or how to work through conflict. And there's pushback, right? So my kids will say, "Mom, don't coach me," or "Stop touchy-feeling me." So I need to remember to not coach without permission. It's hard. I need to hold myself back. The other thing is also that it gives me empathy for, again, the whole thing about reading the book about swimming versus jumping in the pool. Because just the other weekend, I went to actually a day-long workshop on conflict at Stanford. This was for the facilitators, and I came out of it thinking, oh my gosh, I've got so much wisdom, all of this like real insight from all of these awesome facilitators and professors. I'm so good at conflict now. I went back and promptly got into an argument with my son, and I got so triggered and so dysregulated that I could not remember what it was that I was supposed to do. So it's the difference between reading the book and jumping in the pool. I jumped into the pool and promptly sank.
Mhm.
So it gives me empathy for my clients, right? It's hard to do this stuff.
Mm. So what would you say then? Because I wonder, some people may be listening to with this and thinking, darn it, like I thought I was supposed to have some kind of rule books, things that can follow. My coach will help me. I will never have conflicts again. Everything will be great. What is the hope?
The hope is that for my clients, I will say, we're all on a journey.
Mm.
We're all learning, and we'll always be learning. And with especially complicated person-to-person interactions, it takes practice. And the only important thing is that you get better at it, that we get better at it, and that we're committed to working on it and being on that journey.
Mm. So good. And I guess what would be what would be something to look out for as people are going on this journey to say, hey, like that is something that I've either gotten better at or achieved, to say basically a milestone people can watch out for.
Yeah. Rather than a milestone, I will say one thing that I've seen this work be hugely transformative in people's lives.
Mm.
That when they are working on, they'll work on, oh, this what seems to be this work problem, but they develop empathy skills, listening skills that work elsewhere in their lives. I'll give you an example. That there was a student who came to me after a course in interpersonal dynamics and said, wow, this was so transformative because the listening skills that I picked up in this course, I went back and applied outside the course with my family, because we'd just gone through winter break and they'd gone back for holiday dinners.
Mm-hmm.
That it transformed my relationship with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so sometimes just even single types of skills that you're working on, like the ability to listen and empathize and hear other people's needs, that I think can transform relationships across the board.
Yes. Yes. And I think this is maybe one aspect of a success story, because I think another popular question that people ask in coaching, if they're new to coaching, is how do I know it's working? And I think in this specific aspect is if you see that your overall life starts to change a little bit and your overall relationships start to improve because we've addressed a work problem around conflict in coaching sessions.
Yeah. And it's a good question too. One of the things I like to do with my clients is to every so often do a recap. Remember when we started, you came in with this challenge or these few challenges. You wanted to work on them. So we will actually set goals. And then every so often we'll check in and say, how are you progressing against those goals? Right? What have you achieved? What's missing? And then we'll also say, what impacts are you seeing across the rest of your life as a result of your working on these goals? Just so that they can see the progress. Because sometimes our progress is incremental with leaps sometimes, but sometimes it's incremental. But to be able to stand and look backwards a quarter or so and realize, wow, I've actually come a long way. It's useful to take stock.
Okay, good. And is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you want to speak to?
I'll say my personal take is that business and actually life is about people working with people. There's this really long-running study on happiness that Harvard has run. I think it's actually one of the longest longitudinal studies. And they found out that one of the biggest pieces of happiness for humans is having strong and good relationships. And so that's one of the things that's like my spike, helping people work with their relationships at work, outside.
Mm-hmm.
So if you work with me,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully it's in service of both your performance as a CEO, but also for your satisfaction and happiness and connectedness across all of your relationships. And that's the reason why I became a coach, right? It ties back to what my dad told me.
Yeah. There's a really beautiful cohesive theme throughout the conversation we had today. And I think that's what people could expect, whether they work with you or they just meet with you or they interact with you, is that you always have that people theme in mind. And yeah, I think that's a wonderful call out. If anyone is thinking that is the biggest piece in my journey as a leader and as a CEO to get a little bit better on, I think Celine would be, you would be the person to go to.
Yeah, business is people doing things with people.
Yeah, so good. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sabrina. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.